Hi everyone. By the end of this class, you'll be able to compare different jobs using verbs and past participles. For example, let's say that you would like to compare the job of a doctor and a medical assistant. Um, and to do that, you can say the following. A doctor earns more than a nurse. Or you could say that a doctor is better trained than a medical assistant or a nurse. Similar to our previous class, we will be making comparisons between two jobs, with the only exception that this time we'll be using verbs and participles. And let me build on that previous example that I gave you. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to compare using verbs, as you can see. Well, first of all, what are some common work-related verbs that we can think of? Of course, there are many, but what we want to do in this case is we want to think about a few so that we can outline the examples here. And so let me just point these ones out right now. Okay, so we think about verbs that have to do with work. We can think of um, earn, travel, or work, right? And so how do we make comparisons using verbs? Well, as I mentioned previously, what we did was we said that a doctor, right, earns more money than a nurse. So if we look at the words that we use, we can say doctor earns. So we're gonna put the verb there before the more. Okay. Similarly, we could express this in a different way. So let's say we wanted to make a negative sentence. We want to say a nurse doesn't earn more money than a doctor. Right? We're literally saying exactly the same thing, but it's just a different way of putting it, right? Now, let's say that we compare two jobs that pretty much earn just about the same thing. This, of course, is not true in many cases, but we can probably say that a teacher earns as much as a police officer. Now, this obviously, I think this depends on the country. I think that in some cases, a teacher may earn more. In certain, it depends. It also depends what kind of teacher. But a teacher earns as much as a police officer. You can say. So what we're saying here is that they are pretty much on the same level, as you can see, right? And that's another expression that you can use. So then again, what I'm pointing out at this point is that I am making comparisons using the verbs, right? So in this case, these are the things that I want to emphasize. So I'm using that particular verb there, right? Um, I could have added here a teacher earns as much money as a police officer, but if I simply said earns as much as a police officer, we're already kind of like understand what we mean by that. So what I want to do next is continue with this idea, but now I want to make the comparison using past participles. A lot of times we're going to find that the comparison can be basically the same thing if you use verbs and if you use past participles, almost the same thing. So I want you to look at the example here at the very top. Doctor earns more money than a nurse. Well, you can express that idea by simply saying a doctor is better paid than a nurse. Right? So we want to compare the doctor and also the nurse, and literally we're saying the same thing. However, we use a slightly different structure there. Instead of the verb in the present tense, we use the past participle of, in this case, the verb paid. And if we want to make the comparison between the teacher and the police officer, and we want to express that they are kind of like on the same level as far as pay, then we can simply say a teacher is as well paid as a police officer. Okay, but with the only difference is that now we're using past participles to make these comparisons. So the last challenge that I have for you in this particular lesson is to make the comparison between two jobs, any job, but just to give you a quick example of what I want you to do, we're going to make the comparison between a doctor and a nurse. And what I would like for you to do is to use adjectives to compare the two jobs and also use nouns to compare them, use verbs and past participles. So what could be an example of a doctor versus a nurse? Well, you can say pretty much anything, like I mentioned in previous classes. When we think about comparisons, these are all opinions. So we can say doctors, working as a doctor is more interesting than working as a nurse. A doctor has worse hours than a nurse. That's if I'm comparing the noun. A doctor earns more money than a nurse. That's if I'm using verbs. Uh, I could say doctor is better paid than a nurse. And so what you want to do is use what you learned in the previous lesson when we talked about comparisons with adjectives and nouns, and what you are learning in this current lesson, um, which is that you are making comparisons using verbs and also past participles. So do that for these jobs that you see here. Once again, I'll be publishing this document so you can check it out and have easy access to it. And attempt to use adjectives, nouns, verbs, and past participles.